Now we're ready.
Okay. So welcome everyone, and welcome to this evening where we will have be joined by Christine Heath, who's a dear friend and a colleague. We've done some fun things together, but not nearly as much fun as we will in the future, I'm sure. I had the pleasure of having Christine in my last 12-week program for women, and that was a lot of fun. Christine, in a moment, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. But just to say that here in the Danish Three Principles community, we are feeling really lucky that you've said yes to join us tonight. People here are both new to the Three Principles, and some people have been looking in this direction for a while. So you'll find that we are in a lot of different places in terms of level of consciousness, but that's all fun. So I'm assuming that you'll speak for a while and then maybe open up for questions. And I want to tell everyone out there that if there's any of you who want to ask a question of Christine and you don't feel comfortable in English, please just raise your hand and say so, and I'll be happy to translate as well as I can. So welcome and thank you so much, Christine, for being here tonight. Will you unmute yourself and say hello?
Oh, I was talking away and I didn't realize I was muted. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd be happy to introduce myself, but I'd like to get kind of an idea about what you'd like me to talk about rather than just launch into something I think would be interesting, because it doesn't really matter what I think. But so if you have anything in particular that you have questions on or that you'd like me to talk about, I would appreciate, I kind of try to do more of a collegial thing rather than a top-down kind of thing. So you'd help me out a lot if you did that. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been a therapist since 1975. And I started off my work prior to learning the principles, working with people that were in incest families and chemically dependent families. And so I worked with the whole family unit. And so that was back in the 70s when nobody did that. And we were really kind of going by the seat of our pants. And it was quite a rock and roll time, I'll tell you. There was no one to go to because no one had done it. So it was really kind of learning as we went. And so I did that until I learned the principles. After I learned the principles, I shifted from that being my focus, someone's problem like that, to really helping people to be mentally healthy. But in the process, I'm a master addiction counselor and do a lot of work with people that have all kinds of behaviors where they're looking to feel better and doing it as compulsively as they can. So I also wrote a book on relationships called The Secret of Love: Unlock the Mystery, Unleash the Magic. And so I work with a lot of couples, and I work with a lot of it kind of, I've done lots of different things. I've developed programs for lots of different populations in my lifetime. So I've been a therapist now for a long time. So it's like, well, what haven't I done is more the question. So that's kind of where I'm at. I do all of my work based on the principles. And I also have a new podcast that's called Psychology Has It Backwards, which is kind of where we take on the field of psychology and the thinking that has been predominant in the field and try to turn it on its ear.
Thank you. for that introduction. And often when I ask people to be on one of these programs, I love to hear what's cooking, what's new, what's fresh. So that would be my preference. But there's a lot of people here, so if any one of you have something specific, I think one of the things that, because you're one of the people who work directly with Sid, I guess something around that would probably be a great way of introduction, just to share a little bit about what was it around meeting Sid that changed your life, really. What was it that you saw from his teachings that made you go the direction that you've gone and had so much success with? That could be a place to start.
Okay. I think I had the wrong idea of what we were talking about here. So let me just shift gears for a minute.
Oh, I might be all wrong. So please let me know.
No, I'm totally, this is my week of vacation, so I'm kind of an airhead. I am not focused on much. So I'm happy to talk about this. And that's kind of the other thing, is that mainly what I do now is really teach people just about how to help people to be happy. And that's kind of what happened to me. Is luckily I before I met Sydney Banks, Roger Mills came, who's a psychologist, and came to Minneapolis. And at the time, I was 30 and I wasn't married, and I really wanted to get married. And I kept meeting men that had alcohol problems, so it didn't work out very well. I kept running into the same people. And so I thought, well, gosh, if I go to a psychology conference, that'd be a better place to meet men than bars. Obviously, I'm not doing very well. So that was the whole reason I went. I really wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't searching. I thought I kind of, did as best as what was available in the field at the time. And I was pretty cocky about what I knew and what I did. And I really wasn't interested in listening to a male psychologist either talk to me about how to help people, especially women. And so I went, and I was kind of the person in the audience that was asking all the questions. I'm the person you hate to have in your audience, because they're asking you confrontive, argumentative questions. But what happened is that when I would ask those questions, the answer would go over my head. But I thought everybody else in the room understood what he was saying. I thought it was just me that wasn't very smart. And so I didn't follow up, because I was like, oh, okay, I have no idea what he just said, but everybody else probably does, so I won't continue on with that. And then we kind of met for lunch. And at the time, I had a clinic. I was an administrator of a clinic. And we all the therapists from our clinic got together. And we were talking about how this wasn't really anything new, and it was still the same as what we did, and what we did was good too, and blah, blah, blah. And when I got up from the table, it was kind of a weird thing that happened, because like when you're watching a movie and they have the main character continue walking, but everybody else gets stopped in time. And that happened to me. And I like turned around and thought, oh, weird. And then I turned around again, and Roger and I happened to meet at the door going out. And so he started talking to me, because I'm, of course, a troublemaker in the group. And so when he was talking to me, he had the nicest feeling. It's like, I remember it felt like kind of like melted butter. It was just really this soft, loving feeling that he was talking from. And then as I got to know him a little bit, I also realized he was single. So then I started thinking about dinner. Okay, so if I'm going to go out to dinner with this guy, I better pay attention to what he's talking about. And so we kind of, we went back into the thing, and I started listening. Now you have to remember, in 1980, it was considered bad therapy to focus on the positive. That was considered bad therapy, okay? Because you were missing the pathology of the person. You weren't focusing on their problems. You weren't going deep enough with them. It was too surfacey, right? And so he was talking in the afternoon, and I thought, oh, positive. I could do positive. Okay. And like, that's the extent of my insight. Okay. I could do positive. So then we had another break, and there was a physician there, an MD. And at the time, I thought that if you were an MD, that you were kind of one step down from God. If you made it through medical school, I was impressed by that. So I went up to him and I said to him, I said, you know, what do you think about this stuff? And he says, well, it makes good common sense to me. I thought, well, if a doctor thinks this is common sense, maybe I should pay attention. So now I have a total motive in doing this. I'm really not listening to be a better therapist or to get anything for myself. I'm really looking for love in finding a man. So I went back, and now I'm listening. And then he put this diagram on the board, and all of a sudden it shifted in me. And I realized that I was doing everything backwards, that I was trying to fix people after the fact, after they created their symptoms and their behaviors and their problems. And then I saw, like, it's kind of like, you know, where people say your life flashes before your eyes. And like every moment of my life that I had kind of misconstrued flashed in front of my eyes. And I realized that all this time I had looked at this as being an outside in thing, that I was being affected by my world. And it shifted, and I started laughing. And then I thought, because at the time I was in therapy, you know, I was a good therapist trying to keep my head straight. And I'd spent about $25,000 in 7 years analyzing this. And I just cracked up laughing because I thought it was so funny that I had spent all that time analyzing what I was making up. And it just hit me that it was my own thinking. It was all it was. And that's what I was seeing in my world. That's what I was seeing all over the place, and over and over and over again. And I just couldn't stop laughing. In fact, I'd been so serious before this that after this happened, I couldn't stop smiling. And my cheeks, my muscles in my cheeks hurt because I just hadn't smiled for so long. It was pretty funny. And so the next day I'd signed up. There was a first day you signed up, and the second day was optional. But I thought if I met somebody the first day and I wasn't already signed up for the second day, it would look too obvious. So I thought, okay, I'll sign up for both. And evidently I was like the first person to do that. So I walk in the room. Now you can imagine everybody else listening to my questions, right? They see me walk in the room, and you could see their faces just drop, like, oh God, she's here again. But I was so significantly different that the questions I asked were so different. And at the time I had a case that had everything you could possibly dream up of what one human being could do to another. And I said, well, would this work for this family? And I remember Roger told me, he said, they're just human beings. It doesn't matter what they've gone through or what was done to them. Their health is still inside of them. And I thought, wow. Now, the thing that really got me was that I was happy. Now, that's what I was looking for. Like 2 weeks before that, I was thinking about killing myself. So this was like a huge shift for me, right? It was like, wow. And I called my therapist and I said, I went to this training and I'm totally well now. I don't need to come to therapy anymore. And she said, oh, I think you should come back in a month. And I said, okay. So she thought I had a hysterical conversion, and that's what had happened to me. And so I went back in a month, and she said, okay, now what is it that you went through? And so I went through it, and she said, oh, that's like Al-Anon. I saw that in Al-Anon. I was like, yeah, no, that's not the same. But she couldn't hear it. You know, I realized that. But she was bothered by the fact that I never got depressed again. And we continued to be colleagues with each other and run into each other. And for as long as I remember, she was always curious, but never could ask me any more than that. So then I decided, okay, this is not about Roger Mills. This is about me and changing me. So the next day, I'd asked him if he wanted to get a tour of Minneapolis because I just wanted to hang out with him more, really. And so we were at his hotel in the lobby, and he was kind of sitting in one chair and I was sitting in another chair. And he was talking to me about himself. I mean, it wasn't about anything. He was told me where he went to college and what he did, and kind of he followed the same steps as who's the guy that's the I can't. Anyway, you know, the guy that did the theory of E equals MC squared. Anyway, he's a German famous guy that's physicist.
Albert Einstein?
Albert Einstein, yes. Yeah. He kind of followed Albert Einstein around, and in his mind, he was telling me this story about how he was doing this. He was kind of, now thinking back of it, he was quite proud of himself. But something happened to me, and it felt like 1,000 volts of electricity went through my body. And I was kind of sitting in this chair thinking, oh my God, I am being changed right now. This is happening from within me. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here. And then I thought, this is going to be my life's work. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And from that moment on, this is the only thing that I've ever really been interested in. And I've just continued 40 years later to learn about this. So I'm just learning too. Now, what they told me was, okay, you got to come down and learn this. It's a 3-week course. Now, I'd never taken more than 5 days off of work in my life. I was very driven, worked, 80 hours a week. 3 weeks off? Yep, you got to come down to Florida for 3 weeks. Okay. So I go down there, and it happened that Sydney Banks was there at the same time. And so he came down from Canada, and after I was there for about a week, I'm sure they wanted me to slow down a little bit before I met him. And Roger had a get together at his house, and Sydney Banks was coming over to talk to the nurses and the people from the VA where they had started to do this work in Florida. So there's maybe 20 of us, maybe at the most. And I remember when he walked in, he was the most ordinary, extraordinary person I'd ever seen. I kind of in my mind had him, because I had one SID tape. I had the seminar on mental health, which I still think is wonderful. But I listen to that sucker every night. I go do my clinical work and I come home and I listen to it. It's like, oh man, you got caught in the past today. Like things that all of my habits, all of my training was just like getting blasted. And it was so bad actually that I would go do my groups and I would start talking with an A. It was like, oh, I got to stop listening to this, right? So I had this idea about what he was going to be like. I had this kind of, I don't know if I thought he'd have a turban on his head, or that, in some way he'd reflect something that I thought about what an enlightened person would be like. And he wasn't like that at all, but there was a feeling about him that I could feel when he walked in the room, that this was the guy. And what struck me about it was that he was the most ordinary person you could meet. He was so like he was kind of at that, I guess at my age, he was a little old man by then. Now he was kind of a young guy, but it was this very proper, very loving man came in, and he started talking, and I have no idea what he said. I have no idea what he said, but I just know that I felt like I needed to go home and sleep because my mind got so quiet. And it was like I all of a sudden realized how fast I'd been going for years. And I felt kind of a tiredness of years during that time. And then, so after that, I guess he could tell I was listening or for whatever reason, but he said, you know, would you like to go to the swap meet? Now, at the time I was kind of a disco girl, you know, and I swap meets, yeah, not farmers markets, not my deal, but hey, I'll go anywhere with you. So I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to go. And here we're walking up and down with people selling their, what I would call junk, you know, and we're walking by, and I'm struck by how fascinated he is with the stuff, and how he would look at something and see this, like, in fact, I still have these really pretty pictures that were kind of underneath something, and he saw it and pulled it out. And it was just like he would see the beauty in the middle of junk. And that struck me, something about that really struck me about how present he was and how he saw beauty everywhere. Because believe me, that's not my place. I would not be looking for beauty at a swap meet. And there was a way that the way he walked, the way he talked, taught us so much about living in a quieter state of mind, about living in a quieter feeling. And then how life looks differently, what you see changes as a result of that. So then right before I left, I went out to lunch with him, and he said, would you like me to help you? And I was like, yes. And then he said, okay, so I get back to Minneapolis. Now this is before cell phones, or we didn't have cell phones. And I pick up the phone in my office. Hello, this is Sid. How are you doing, dearie? It's like, oh my God, good. I'm good, good. He said, well, would you like me to help you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you just have to be yourself, dearie. Just be yourself. And in my mind, I'm like, well, who the heck is that? I've been trying to figure that out for years. And then he said, just be ordinary. Just be an ordinary person. That's it. That's all you have to do. And I'll tell you, couldn't have said better words to me through the years, that has come to me a million times, is that that's all it is, really, is just be you. And as you discover really what you are, who you are, it keeps unfolding. It keeps unfolding. So what you see and what you get and what changes in your life becomes better and better. I'm telling you, it gets better and better. There's no other school of thought in our business that happens. You know, like I meet other people at supervisor trainings, you know, and things like that have been in the field for a while. They are so burned out. They're so jaded. They have, like, the hopelessness is unbelievable. They're like, oh, I don't want to see clients anymore because they say the same thing and it's boring. And to me, like, my husband keeps telling me, I'm going to be 70 in August. And my husband keeps saying, like, are you going to retire? And I was like, did I ever tell you I was going to retire? And I said, but I'm going to try to cut back. I'm going to try to cut back. I really want to just really work with professionals and train people. And that's kind of my thing. But so far, every time I make a rule, okay, no new patients, then somebody from the past comes, oh, I need a little tune up, and so far it hasn't worked, but I'm working on that. And yeah, it's just such a gift to me. I'm so grateful. And again, the other thing that's pretty different about this from traditional work is that most people don't even make it 40 years. They don't make it 40 years in this business because they get burned out, right? It's like compassion fatigue and burnout. That's kind of like everybody thinks that's a given, that's the way you're going to be. And it's just not true. It's just not true. I mean, do you get tired? I mean, this week I got tired, man. There's something about working on Zoom too that kind of tires me for some reason, but maybe it's because I'm working too much. But it's like you get tired, you do that, but you don't lose your well-being. You don't lose your sense of wonder. You don't lose your sense of learning. And there's not very many professions that you can say that about.
That really what it sparks in me is the podcast that you have with Judy, like Psychology Has It Backwards.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this that is so different? I mean, I love I've listened to all of your podcasts. I think they're great. But could you speak about that? What is it that that psychology has backwards?
Well, psychology is focused on treating what people create, right? So you're treating someone's anxiety or their depression or their relationship or their behaviors. But all of that is after the fact, right? It's like all of that comes from a given state of mind a person is living in. So I think there's two things. One is that when you see life as causing your experience, then you're focused on changing life. When you see that life is coming from within you, then you focus on changing yourself. So that's a shift. That's a huge shift. That shift is the thing that makes us the most different from any schools of thought in psychology. That, and then the other thing is that we see that people live in different levels of mental well-being. So knowing that people have innate health is the third, probably the most important thing, is that knowing that innate health in people, that they can't be broken, that no matter what's happened to them, they're not destined to suffer. They're not destined to have to cope. Like I would tell people that I work with an incest victim and say, look, right now, this is like a big sun in your sky, and it'll get to a little thing like this of light on the horizon. Like, did I know that? No, I just made that up. But it was like, you'll never be over this. It'll always be there. You'll always have to cope with it. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. And that's just not true, is that people, even in the midst of trauma, have moments when they're in mental well-being. Now, that's a really powerful thing for a human being to hear, that they are not the product of the circumstances of their life, that they have the ability to be innately healthy no matter what. Now, if you say, well, yeah, but some people are healthier than others. Well, that's true. Like if you look at anxiety is not just, it's not a thing. This field talks about it like it's a thing, right? Like, oh, that's my anxiety, or oh, that's my depression, or that's my addiction. And people make it a thing. We create a form with it in our heads. But those are things that are just generated from the state of mind a person is living at. So when you're looking at levels of consciousness, you have people that are really, really outside in, really negative, really hateful and hurtful, and living in a state of mind that's hell. And then it gets better by degree. So then some people are more like troubled. So they have trouble with everything in their life. They have trouble keeping a job. They have trouble with everything. If they go up a little bit more, they're kind of chronically unhappy, negative people. And then people that are the healthiest you can be in a stressed state of mind are what we'd call stressed but okay, right? Like, but that's all within levels of outside in. That's looking at life outside in. That's where you're going to live. So psychology takes a person at that level, and then they analyze the crap out of what came out of that state of mind. So they're looking at what you think and how you perceive things and how you feel and how you act and what happens around you, depending on your focus, right? But what we do is we change level. Well, then all of that changes without effort. So it's a totally different way of looking at human change. That's why when people are at this level and they're creating this, that trying to change an addiction or change something at that level is really difficult, because you're using the same thinking that created the problem to try to solve it. And you just get more of the problem. So you don't get better. You just understand why you're not good, which is interesting, but doesn't help you to feel better. Doesn't change your life. So changing by helping people to understand mental well-being and live there more of the time is also the thing that makes us very different from psychology. So those kinds of things kind of play out in different ways, you know, like people look at depression as well. Like I've got this client who's a neuropsych major in college, and she's talking to me about the neurons and this and that and the other thing. And I said, no, honey, we're talking about what turns all that on. Like none of that happens if you're not alive, right? I said, your brain doesn't like create what you think. That's coming from you. Otherwise, we'd use Siri to tell us what to do with everything. It's just kind of artificial intelligence that you've programmed in that you think looks like it's the truth. She goes, well, what? And I said, see, that's the deal. You can't think about this. You got to listen. So, you know, it's that component of listening so that people awaken to what they already know. That's really different than analyzing what they think and processing all of the events of their life. Like, I don't know about you, but, you know, I'd see people, they'd come in and I'd talk to them about some problem they had. Frequently, I had the same problem the week before. And I'd like make up an answer. You know, I'd make this answer up, like, go do this, go do that. Like, what did I know? I didn't know what they did. I had a hard enough time with myself. And then what would happen is the next week they'd come back and I'd check in with them. Well, whatever that was off their mind. They didn't do anything about it. Nothing happened. And they're onto something else. So there was like a constant flow of clients. You didn't have to get very many referrals because people would just come in with new problems all the time, different things on their mind, and wanted to process their life. And I didn't realize this, but one of the things that I noticed is that I had a stack of, now again, this is before cell phone, so no voicemail, but we'd have like, people would call and they'd write down a note and say, call this person, this is the number, this is what they're calling about. At the end of the day, I'd have a stack like that. And mind you, I had 65 clients a week. So I had a stack like that of people calling me wanting to talk about their specific problem, something that happened that they were in crisis about. The month after I changed, my stack went from this to this. Like maybe I get 1 or 2 crisis calls a month, maybe with a new client. That's it. And so that was like, to me, like, oh my gosh, that is so much less work for me. I could go home and like have fun as opposed to go home and work for another 3 hours calling people back with their issues, right? So it makes your life easier. Sorry, my boys back there relaxing. Yeah, so those are some different things. Does anybody, you have any questions about anything specific?
Yeah, please, if anyone wants to say something, you can raise your digital hand or raise your real hand and we'll try and catch you.
Okay, I'm just gonna mute. I'm sorry. There was somebody else wanted to say something, but I'm just gonna jump in if that's okay.
Yeah, go.
I already started interrupting. So, you know, well, I'm also a psychology student, and this is really a game changer, this understanding. I'm just so curious because like, it's actually about changing, isn't it, like the state of mind that people are in? Because when they're in a high mood, then their problems are vanishing. And then they can see that it's actually not the forms that you create with your thinking, it's that your perspective of the world is changing according to your mood. So showing that is enough. Yeah, am I hearing you right?
Yes, that's exactly it. And the only thing is that I would just add to that is that it's not about, we can't change their state of mind. Believe me, I've tried many times. But it's helping people to awaken to what they don't see, to the inside out nature of things. And that shift, that insight is then what quiets them down. That's what brings in this good feeling. It's like that insight I had, like, oh my God, this is coming from me. That insight changed my life. That moment in time changed my life. And that when people see that, then they change whatever they need to do. But their state of mind will change all the time. I mean, it does for all of us, right? It's just noticing that. So it's not you changing their state of mind. It's you living in your own health, being in that feeling. Like, you know, when I met Roger, the feeling he was in, the way he listened, his sense of being present was such a different experience for me. And that was what got me. And that's where the power is in this, is not in the words, but it's in the feeling that comes through you. So like when I was first learning this, I thought, oh my God, you know, like I had a day and a half, like, what do I know about this? But I knew I couldn't go back to doing it the other way. That was a no-go, right? So I was like, oh my God, I have to walk into the unknown and have no clue what I'm doing. But that's the fun of it, right? And then you start to see, like, keeping it simple to me is what's important. And as you do that, people wake up. So I always think of people like popcorn, you know, like some of them pop right away. Some of them pop later on. Some of them, you got to put them back in the micro and do it again. You know, it's like, but everybody has the potential to pop. And it's just guiding people in that direction, pushing people in that direction. So I always say that therapy is like people come in and they're like looking at their thinking. They're caught up in their thinking. So they're like, rah, 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 rah. And therapy is like, no, look over here. Rah, 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 rah. No, look over here. Rah, 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 rah. No, look over here. Oh, over there. And it's like, oh, I see it. And you know, when that happens, your work is done. Then they'll take it from there and start to see how to make changes in their life. And they're simple changes. They're simple changes, but they make a profound effect. The more complicated we get, the more we get into the details of things. And believe me, as therapists, don't we love those details, right? It's like listening to that and be focusing on that. It's like, it's very intellectually enticing, because it's kind of fun to figure people out, right? Like, oh, this happened because of this and that and this and that and this. Oh, that's very interesting. But does it help them? No. No. You know, like I would take people back in the past, right? Let's go back through your trauma. Let's talk about your trauma. And then they wouldn't get better and they'd be down again. I said, okay, let's go one more time. Like, how many times can you go through your past before you realize that that's not working? But it appears that way to us, doesn't it? Because when people come in and what comes out of their mouth is what's on their mind. And what's on their mind is their past. They're in that mode of thinking and accessing their intellect. So that's what appears to be the problem. So then we get tricked by that, trying to fix all that. And because they're pretty convinced that's what the problem is, right? And so it's a little dance at first to get them to see that that's not really going to help them. And sometimes you have to listen. You got to listen to what's going on so that they get quieter, because you're quieter. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. See, it's like there's no rules to this, but it's like a dance. It's like you got to get the dance, and you have to be able to dance. Like, you have to be able to maintain your mental well-being. You have to know that they can get better no matter what. And when you know that, you start to see their health everywhere. You start to see it everywhere.
Yes.
So it's so super simple, but again, very profound in that we get out of the complexities that psychologists got us in.
And psychology in academia is super complex. Like you have all the factors. You have society, you have, childhood, you have trauma, you have all these diagnoses. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
And I just, feel myself getting dumber and dumber because I'm like, it's so simple. It gets more and more and more simple. And I really don't buy all that anymore because it doesn't help.
Yeah, no. But this is interesting for you. This is what I tell my students, is that when you go to school, like you're going to get a history lesson about how people thought about things and talked about things when they didn't know these discoveries. And so you're kind of ahead of time in that way. But if you just are listening, it helps, because when you talk to somebody, you're going to learn about how they think and about what's in their life, right? And that keeps you from getting sucked in too much. Exactly. It's easy though. It's easy. I tell you this story. I had a client that had kind of been treated for some severe schizophrenia, bipolar. She had every diagnosis in the world and was on Haldol. And so she came in and she started coming in every week working with me. And I went to my continuing ed training for addictions. And I came back and I was meeting with her. It was a Friday. I'd been there for 3 days, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I was meeting with her. And she stopped me halfway through the session and she said, "Chris, I think that training you went to this week has affected you. You're starting to talk like a traditional therapist." I was like, ah! It had gotten in my head, right? It does. It just gets in our head because we get so conditioned with that. So, it's like, don't worry about that. Just listen for your feeling and stay home. Like, stay home. Don't go there. You can listen to it and say, "Oh, that's really backwards." But that's how I see, that's how they were thinking. And you can pass your exams and you'll be fine.
Well, thank you so much.
No, you'll do a lot to help people. You've got a beautiful feeling.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, you too. Well, I mean, people get beautiful feelings when they see our design, that it's inside out, that we actually have something to say in our lives. We are free. That makes people, happy.
Yeah, that's right.
Free. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And that just got to let that come through you, because that's going to do all the work no matter what. Doesn't matter really what you know. Doesn't matter the words. That's one of the reasons I love that we have Sid Banks on tape and that we can have him listen. I'm sorry that we don't have it in translated into Danish, but maybe we'll get some subtitles done with that, because it doesn't really matter though. I mean, if people listen to him, even if they can't understand the words, if you just tell them to listen to the feeling, it's just as powerful because it's not in the words, right? But that's what I love about that, is that we still have him there, because I'm not anywhere close to the state of mind he was in, the level of consciousness that he was operating in. And so sometimes I'm not high enough to pull somebody out, but if they listen to him, there's something that happens that shifts in them, and then they kind of settle down a little bit. Usually, not always, but. Thanks for that question. It's a good one.
You too.
Anybody else have an insight or something that they want to talk about?
We have Senia who's raised her hand.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. You talk about the Sydney said to you to be ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
How did you understand that at that time, and is the same now? The understanding of to be ordinary, what is it for you?
Well, we're all the same thing. Like there's nobody special. And to me, when people think they're special, either like in my case, I thought I was special in a negative way. That's, you know, I was one of the few people behind the door when God passed out the goodness. And I could see other people were good, right? But I didn't think that I was. And so that's one way of being special. Being special in another way is thinking you're better than other people, that you know more than other people. And so to me, it's just kind of keeping that in mind, that I'm just a person. I'm just a person. I was really lucky to find out about something really magical. And I was really lucky that it came out of me, because I didn't do anything to do it. And so just being an ordinary person, living an ordinary life, and making that come from a beautiful feeling actually is extraordinary. But it's not, I'm not different than anybody else. So for me, it was seeing that I'm just as good as anybody else, and I'm not better than anybody else, and I don't need to be. Like I could get rid of all of that ego that I needed to like prove myself. I needed to be okay when I didn't think I was. So now I don't know, but I don't know things and I don't care. So it's like whatever I need, it'll come to me, or I'll find somebody else to tell me about it. Or, you know, it's just kind of like trusting in that energy of life, that that's really what we are, that we all are this beautiful force of life. And when we connect with that, we're all the same. That's why we can talk on this electronic medium, and we can feel connected, because we connect on the inside. We're halfway around the world from each other, yet we can feel connected in that moment, in this moment. Now that's pretty special when you look at that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. And that's kind of that's to me, that's seeing that is kind of like the proof of innate health to me, that if we all are that energy, then we all have that ability to be pure. And then we think. And whatever we think, that's going to create our uniqueness in life. That's what's going to create what's different about us. So we can appreciate that and we can change that. But we are what we are, and we are this beautiful feeling. We are the energy that creates all things. My mother was funny. She had Alzheimer's. She died 6 weeks short of 100. And she had Alzheimer's pretty mildly, I would say, for about 16 years, which is a long time. And when she was 98, so she was pretty, not doing great. But we had a Mother's Day party for her, and we got her an ice cream cake, which she loved. And then we had all of the people from the nursing home coming in to get their piece of cake. And they would all come in and tell her how wonderful she was. And she married a Norwegian with the last name of Hustaf. And so they would call her Helen Hot Stuff. And so, you know, she would laugh and she was giggling and she was having a good time. So all these people came in, they were telling her how wonderful she was and how special she was. And my sister looked at her and she said, "Mama, everybody thinks you're so special. They think you're really special." That's so great. And my mother puts her fork down and looks at my sister and said, special. I'm not special. Unique maybe, but not special. Now that's pretty darn wise, isn't it? So I learned that from her, man. That's it. It's like, we're not special, any of us. Unique, but not special. And that's really the paradox of the principles, isn't it? It's kind of like, we're not special, but we're unique. We slow down to get more done. We quiet down to see more. It seems like it's a paradox.
Anyone else has a question? We still have about 9 minutes left. If anyone has something you want to ask, or maybe share an insight that you've had.
Or if you have any of those questions, like, yeah, but Chris, what about this? Ask away. I love those questions.
Okay, it's me again.
Okay.
So how do you explain the principle of mind to your clients?
Oh, I don't.
You don't?
No, okay. I don't. When I talk about the principles to my client, I talk to them about how it works in the moment. Like I'll talk about mind, but I talk about it as the energy that creates you. It's like the part that's missing when you see somebody in a casket. Like whatever that is, that's what I'm talking about. And people get that. It's like some people call it your soul, your spirit. I don't care what people call it. Some people call it God. Some people call it life. Some people call it energy, whatever works. So I'm usually listening and letting people know that they are that energy. And then I have them listen to Sid tapes, and he talks about that. He talks about it much better than I can. I'll tell you that it's like you just have to, and this is, again, I think part of the training that we have gets us into talking about something we know nothing about. And it's, you just got to watch that you don't talk over your head. It's like you don't have to explain all that and get into it, because people get thinking about it and then they get like, can't figure it out. And you're like, I don't really know what mind is, like I don't know that, but I know how it works. I see how it works. And so that's more important for people, is to point them in that direction. They already know the principles. Like you don't really have to teach people the principles. It's built into us. We already know it. So you just got to point them in that direction, and they'll make the connection on their own in a way that works for them. Otherwise, you start talking about it too much, you get intellectual, and then you lose the feeling, and then they get intellectual and they start trying to compare it to something they already know, like the way they think about religion, or the way they think about spirituality, or the way they think about psychology. And then you're going to be in trouble. You got to go back. And so that's how I do it anyway. I don't really care. Like Sid said in one of his tapes, he says, I think it's talking to therapists. And he says, he said, oh, mind, don't worry about that. You don't have to talk about that. We don't really understand what that is anyway. Consciousness, don't worry about that. It's just kind of like how the fact that you can see a reality, and you can be conscious, you can be aware of things. And thought is just this, mystical gift that we have, that we can create these things called thoughts that don't exist. That it's keeping it simple, but seeing how it works, then people will on their own awaken to what they see in that. Like they'll see that on their own. And that's what that's what's more valuable than you talking about it.
Yes, that's a very good point. I mean, I've we had George Pransky just before talking, and he said something about only talk about what you know, and it's really simple, but only talk about what you know. So it gets very ordinary too, and just very close to yourself. But like I said, like when I'm pointing in that direction, sometimes I mean, sometimes I don't even mention it at all, the 3 principles, but I talk about how they work. Sometimes I say something about like it's your soul, or it's your life force, or something like that. And I think sometimes the words can, give that feeling of, being spiritual beings that we are too. So, but it differs, like what words.
Well, that's the deal, is like in the moment, you have to be listening to your wisdom, and it will guide you as to what to say to anybody. If you start thinking ahead of time, like I've got to think about this and do this, you're going to be in trouble, because there's then you're coming from your head. You're coming from memory then. And we got to remember, memory is the dead thought cemetery. So you have life and a thought, it goes into memory. You have life and a thought, it goes into memory. It's just like there's no feeling there. That's why when we get caught up in our head too much, there's no feeling. You don't get a feel for a person. If you call it like a flat affect, is someone that's up in their head too much, right? There's no feeling. So it's not like you kind of have to like not care so much about what you know, because then whatever you need to say to that person in the moment, I'll tell you, and most of the times when people get insights, it's something I said off the cuff. Like I can be talking really, profoundly, and I think I'm saying these wonderful things, and they get nothing. And then I'll say, as they're walking out the door, like, don't forget to smile or something. I mean, I don't say that, but you know what I mean? Something off the cuff. And they'll come back and say, wow, when you said that, it really hit me. Because people come in for counseling, they come in for therapy, they come in for help. They're coming in with a mindset already that you're going to do something to them, right? They come in with this idea that there's something wrong with them and you're going to do something to them. So getting them to see that they've got their own answers and that they've got what they need inside of them has to come in a unique way with every single person, and every single person each time you're there, right? Because, like in traditional psychology, people look at having a strategic plan and thinking about what they're going to do in the next session. And I asked one of my colleagues one time, I said, now, why would you do that? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, well, if what you did in the week before helped them, wouldn't they be different the next week? And he was like, what? I said, so you're basing your intervention this week on what happened last week, right? He goes, yeah. I said, well, what if they changed? What if they're different? What if what you said to them shifted them and they were in a different place? It never occurred to him, because he was like on this plan, got to do this, I got to say this is my intervention. But if you think about it, you got to be very extemporaneous as a therapist. You've got to be in the moment and awake and in your own health. And if you do that, then whatever it is you need to see or do or say in the moment, it'll come to you. But you got to get out of your head, because whatever that is isn't going to help you. But remember, wisdom accesses memory, but memory cannot access wisdom. You can't do it the other way. But whatever you know about the person, it'll come to you. You don't have to worry about keeping that on your mind. It'll come to you in a new way. Like there's this guy that I'm working with. He's quite insecure, and he's in the courts. He before I met him, well, actually, I was doing couples counseling with him, where he's trying to kill his wife, basically. And then he stopped coming in, he was much better, but he stopped coming in because she moved to Mississippi or something. And then he came back and started using drugs again, and then got into a skirmish, and the police came, and he had unlicensed firearms, blah, blah, blah. So now he's 2 years later, he's still in the court system. And he was talking to me about, the judge told him he had to have a psyche eval, because he's obviously, when he's in court, he's not functioning very well. And so he tells me, he said, no, I went in and I told the judge I didn't do it. I said, well, why did you do that? Well, he said, the process hasn't been fair in court. I said, and so then all of a sudden it hit me. That's the same thing he did with his wife. He would like try to kill her. And then he'd say, yeah, but she's not nice to me all the time either. Right? It's just like, oh. And I said, you know, this is the deal. When you start thinking this, if the judge tells you to do it, just do it. Don't think about it, because he's got the power right now. And whether things haven't been fair or not isn't what you have on your mind. You remember how you used to think about this with your wife? He goes, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. I said, you just got to stop trying to fight it and just go ahead. Whatever's going to happen to you is going to be fine. You'll be fine. And, you know, if you get a psyche eval, they're going to say, oh, this guy was on drugs then, and he acted this way, and he hasn't been that way for 2 years. He's going to be better. I said, it'll be fine. Just go ahead and do this. But he gets stuck on this way of thinking that it's got to be equal. Like if he'll say, I know I did that. I shouldn't have done it. That was bad. But, And so when I could pull that in with him, it's like, oh, I see what I'm doing. You see? So you don't have to worry about that. It'll be there. What you need will be there, and it'll come to you. And it'll come out in a totally different way, in a way that they can actually hear it. Sometimes it takes a couple times with that with people.
Thank you so much. Oh, I could listen to you all night, which would be all day for you, but you're on vacation, so I'm not going to ask you to.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. It's been very nice. I really appreciate you asking me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, and please enjoy the rest of your vacation and say hi to Sam. And
I will. And you guys, is it cold up there?
Yeah, spring is springing a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Okay. Did you get a lot of snow this winter?
Yeah, we got a fair amount. Actually, just 1 week ago, it was freezing cold. It was like 18 Fahrenheit, and this week it's I don't know, 40 or something.
Wow, it was like 22 below last week in Minnesota.
Yeah.
My sisters still live there, so they were calling me, wishing they could come to visit. I said, "Get your vaccine. Not coming here until you get your vaccine."
Yeah, I feel the same way. All right, I'll see you soon.
Well, it's great to meet all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo.